If women were to disappear for a year, or even more, how would life be like? There would be a massive health care worker shortage. And an educator shortage. There's already an educator shortage. There's also already a healthcare worker shortage. Both would get significantly worse. The paid teacher would be the only left at many schools. So basically no teachers, in a lot of places. Social services too. Lady dominant field. As the average male seeks health care once every 5 years. I was congratulating a man for coming to the ED for heart attack symptoms. He said, "Thank you, but I'm going to be honest here. My wife made me come. I wasn't going to come to the hospital. Had a major heart attack, found lots of undiagnosed heart issues, all because his wife made him go to the hospital. You didn't save his life, you ruined his death. Is this The Incredibles? I don't know, something amazing I guess." As both a man and an EMT, this really hits home. Men will handwave off the symptoms of some very serious issues. That's 95% of men. Check out. Who goes that often? I once broke my hand and lived with it for 2 days until my wife forced me to get an X-ray. If she wasn't around, I'd still be dealing with it. No clue. I shattered my thumb and was taken to the hospital for a checkup, got crated and told it was over 100 pieces. Told the bill and left. Thumb works fine with no pain now. Your midichlorian count must be off the chart. My dad broke his pelvis, sent the ambulance away that night. 3 days later was headbutted by a sheep, broke his nose and had a concussion but still wouldn't go. Went to the GP 10 days after the initial incident for something else entirely. She saw his severe limp and swollen nose. Finally convinced him to go to hospital for the injuries. Daft fucker carried on working and now needs 2 vertebrae fused. For a smart man he can be so stupid. How did your wife convince you to go? My boyfriend is so stubborn. He has literally been in the most pain and won't go to the doctor. It's unreal. Just say so you won't have sex with him. Works wonders. You'd be amazed. Hell, because I would have only 2 coworkers. Out of the 14 of us, it'd just be me. Are you a harem anime protagonist? But approximately half the clients. Bright side. I'd still be kissing the homies. Gotta kiss the homies goodnight. You gay if you don't tuck ya homies in at 9. Yeah, sadly it wasn't my cup of tea. 2 things. I would miss my wife. Target would go out of business. 3. Unsupervised use of fireworks. Is that because all women are gone or just your wife? I'll also miss this guy's wife. Without my wife I'd turn into some sort of caricature of myself. Probably the same for most happily codependent men like me. If I know they're gone for a year, I'm in the gym getting ready for the re-emergence. If they vanish and I'm clueless, I probably just live in comfier, less stylish clothes. Plans for re-emergence. Sits at home every day eating pizza and ice cream. Hey, too real. You wouldn't need to work hard. Lots of men would die during that year, probably many more than in an average year, and no babies would be born, so when all the women came back there would be a much greater number of women per man. I don't think that no babies would be born affect the women in your dating pool. It just means from a societal level, the world will be far out of balance in a year in terms of men-women ratio. It wouldn't be immediately obvious, but over the next 5 to 20 years the gap would become noticeable. Half the population vanished for a year. Apocalypse happens. The price of pillows would drop dramatically. And hoodies. Because I won't have to buy so many replacements. That'd be a real pain in the ass. Not with that attitude. Fathers, sons, brothers, lovers, would freak out and spend that year in depression and looking for their lost loved ones. Some new cults would be born, some existing doomsday ones would get traction. Hospitals around the world would collapse around the world, because of lack of nurses, causing a shit ton of death and troubles in general. Same thing for other industries dominated by women. A shit ton of newborn boys would spend their first year without breastfeeding, must suck. A shit ton of industries and businesses based around women products, makeup, jewelry, etc. would collapse. A shit ton of newborn boys would spend their first year without breastfeeding, must suck. You just made me realize that pregnant women would also disappear. Wait, would they leave male fetuses behind? Yeah, the baby comes out as they get lifted up in the spaceship tractor beam. Just baby boys left on the floor. A newborn baby that is currently breastfeeding. Your comment sounds like something straight out of the infographics show. It totally fucking does LMAO. I'd love a year off. Where are we going, ladies? Nice try, Steve. Why is it always Steve? Odd fact, I have never met a guy named Steve I considered likable. Makes me a Stevist, I guess. A Stevia. Goddammit, Steve. Ask Steve. What island paradise can contain about 4 billion women? Let's go to the Amazonia planet. Femputer know what do. I wonder if Australia could sustain 4 billion people. Yes. Come and hang with me. I was gonna say who'll kill all the bugs until I read your name. Absolutely, until they get thirsty. Or need shade. Otherwise send the ladies. Party at my house, honestly free and incredible childcare included, please. I'm going full ghost. Seeing all the shows, riding all the rides. Without question, more gay sex. Why? Straight dudes can use our hands. Good to know you're offering up the use of your hands. The bisexual guys who are in the closet will have a good reason for coming out. Great reason to come. We stay winning. Straight dudes have sex with men in prison all the time. Not sure if you're being serious, but no women would result in an exponential increase in gay sexual activity. People get desperate. Just look at prisons. Stephen King wrote a book about this called Sleeping Beauties. It's a little more complicated than all the women just disappearing, but some shit goes down. I think I'd be chillin' in our place with all the other gals. Lotta dudes on here wouldn't even notice. True, but most of them would lose a lot of weight cause their moms aren't cooking for them anymore. They might have to leave their mom's basement and forage for food and laundry. Impossible, the sunlight would burn their skin. I'd miss the heck out of my wife. She's dope. Yeah, my wife knows my Reddit account name too, so I'd totally miss her right away. Sick pic though, man. We've been wanting a bulldog for ages. Love those things. Where are we going during the disappearance? Like I'm in, but I just wanna be prepared. I like to take some books with me. One thing I imagine is no more debate of breast is best or formula. All the remaining baby boys will be formula fed and more mannies. But ultimately I hope that my husband misses me a bit. I know I'm a piece of work, but I try not to be. It is the coming back to the shitstorm that would be a problem. Would a year break be worth having to come back to a world and fix everything? I would be very sad. This is one of those questions with implications similar to the Thanos snap nobody thinks about. Hell, it's almost exactly the same. The answer is the collapse of civilization. You're basically asking what would happen if the Thanos snap happened, except we live in a world without superheroes. Civilization would end. Massive wars and resource fighting would break out as infrastructure crumbled. Governments and social order would fall apart quickly as a panicked 4 billion people, who have no information that the other 4 billion will ever come back, fall into despair. First of all, most cities on Earth burn to the ground. Why? Fires. When half of all people disappear, anyone who is lighting candles or cooking or working with fire, anyone who is smoking or using fire in any way is gone. Their homes start fires. In cities, they start large fires. You'd think okay, firefighters are mostly men, no issue, right? But the roads are clogged with abandoned cars. All the cars women were driving are now in the middle of every street on Earth. I guess places like Saudi Arabia are okay since they don't view women as people and barely let them drive. But everywhere else, the firefighters can't drive down roads. I would guess 50% of all major cities burn to the ground in the first 2 weeks. Then you've got all the same issues with jobs, resources, family issues, depression, the economy, etc. that you might get from the snap. Except it's worse because we don't have superhero tech to cheat out of problems. When hospitals fail, there's no backup. When school staff disappears, record keepers, surgeons, senators, it all goes to chaos. All goes to war. Unlike in Infinity War, there won't be a public explanation. So everyone turns on each other. God did this. Aliens did this. Scientists did this. Nation X did this. War, 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 depression and war. Civilization as we know it falls, full stop. The funny part is that's all what happens, guaranteed. without even addressing the fact that it's all the women. Of course that has terrible consequences as well. I'm going to guess suicide skyrockets a la Children of Men, since the remaining humans could rightfully assume there is no future for humanity since the last generation of children have been born. You'd also see an insane death toll to babies, children, and the elderly, since women by majority tend to oversee caretaking of these members of society. Probably 300+ million dead in those categories in the first few weeks, in addition to the death toll from the fires and chaos. You're looking at 2+ billion deaths in the first month, if not more. That means humanity loses 4 billion right away, then another half in a month. By 2 months in there are probably less than 800 million humans left alive. War, famine, suicide, and chaos will probably have that by end of year. You could see global human population decline to under 400 million in 12 months. Now, if all men disappeared, this scenario would play out similarly. There could be more upfront deaths since more rescue workers tend to be men, and fewer midterm deaths since women have lower rates of suicide and would also be around to care for babies in particular. If women can get sustainable cloning, gene work necessary to sustainably create new babies quickly, civilization probably wouldn't end, but it would still massively decrease. Maybe down to 1 billion in the first year just on the hope alone that humanity could survive. But they'd still have to perfect the technology within about 35 years maximum to prevent total global human extinction. This is so thorough, I love it. If all men disappeared, at least the women could benefit from the copious amounts of frozen sperm available, wouldn't necessarily be the end of our species. If the women disappeared, we'd be gone in no time. No way we'd perfect cloning within a single generation, so we're either dead or mutated into something else through failed experimentation. Doh. I hate when I post a comment only to scroll down and see someone already said the same thing 30 minutes before me. But this. Women would just make more men. Men would be fucked. Have you not seen that 1994 documentary, Junior? No. Power plants are staffed by like 90% men. The electricity would go out after 24 hours. Everywhere. No electricity, no water or heat. Stores wouldn't be stocked because the trucks are run by 90% men. Society would literally collapse within a week or so. If women disappeared, we could maybe last a few decades or so after the initial wave of death that results from hospitals being understaffed. Sounds like you might enjoy Seven Eves by Neal Stephenson. That's a great book. I wish I had a Reddit award to give you, but I'm poor, so here you go. Haha, I appreciate it. Loved your answer. In the men disappearing scenario, what about the upfront death reduction, since women tend to be much more involved in cooking in the household, majority of fire sources I assume. Therefore, things on fire left unattended are much less numerous and would not cause massive fires that could not be extinguished by the remaining women. I am trying to think about situations where men tend to be around stuff on fire, but could not come up with much in labs. What do you think about nuclear disasters? I don't know what's the proportion of women in nuclear plants, related fields knowledgeable about how to deal with cooling, storing, etc. Would we have enough time to manage that? It's going to be a toss-up in a lot of directions. Men work more in power plants, utilities, and infrastructure. Losing these is catastrophic. Men work more in the military. This means in the women disappear scenario little happens. But in the men disappearing scenario, the countries that allow women in the armed forces are positioned to basically dominate the world. The USA, Israel, China, Libya, Peru, etc. could essentially instantly turn the chaos to their advantage and directly conquer neighboring countries if desired. Even if the women-led forces don't want this, they basically have infinite military leverage over 95% of the earth, even more so than before. Worth noting that while men outnumber women in politics, that gap is much larger in many nations on Earth than it is in the USA or similar countries. Countries that do not encourage women in government will be thrown into complete anarchy as the entire rule of law and governance disappears instantly. In countries like the USA, power will be quickly shifted to the highest next woman. The population may gripe about red-blue voting records, but ultimately they will also see other countries descend into civil war or chaos and be glad we have an operating system in place. On that note, it's fair to say either way all of today's political parties would fall apart, failing to have meaningful platforms under this new and terrible global reality. Nobody is going to be arguing over sexual orientation issues in schools when most sex no longer exists, schools no longer exist, and every nation is involved in a five-way war with a constant refugee crisis. Women work more in healthcare, home aid, etc. As mentioned in the post, this means a drastic shift in mid-length deaths. Medical care, mental health care, etc. will all continue better under the men disappear scenario. Men are 50% more likely to be farmers than women, but it's not a huge gap that can't be overcome in either direction. That said, supply lines to farms for food will be destroyed, so the advantages will depend if women or men work on smaller, less industrial farms, and I can't find data for that. Most nuclear plants aren't wired in a way where simply going offline or understaffed means a meltdown. There are enough female engineers, and nuclear meltdown is enough of a risk, that they should be able to avoid catastrophe, since it would be a high priority system to maintain for the remaining world governments. There should be enough women and men in biological sciences to prioritize genetic, cloning, womb technology, but men would be at a huge disadvantage by sheer situation and biology. They would need 100x more luck in breakthroughs, which would be unlikely given the situation they're in. The good news is their sperm will be available for 70+ years, essentially giving them about 2x as long as women to cure this issue with science. As someone pointed out, women have a huge advantage in that they can tap into frozen sperm banks around the world for a long time, assuming infrastructure doesn't collapse and render them useless. If the frozen banks work out, they should be able to keep some kind of population going for a while. If not, it is a mad dash for 35-ish years to figure out how to sustainably implant cloned humans until enough men are born to repopulate. Welding and fabrication jobs, HVAC work, just a lot of heavy industrial jobs that use open flames or heat sources in general would likely offset the household cooks disappearing. To counter this though, we should also consider the difference in impact of residential versus industrial areas, such as how far apart buildings are spaced, general fireproofing, gender disparities in those buildings, ages in those buildings, etc. For example, a candle tipping over in an apartment building would likely set the table on fire, or a rug, which could spread quickly and affect many units, likely with children inside or the elderly who may not be as mobile. Sprinklers would probably still engage, but you could have a lot of fatalities from that, or any residential house. If a fire started in a factory, it's likely in a lot with parking around it, acting as a fire barrier, and likely doesn't have a wooden floor. Further, anywhere with child labor laws means that the people in there after the disappearance are working age, mobile, and can likely still follow evacuation procedures. So I think that there's still a disparity in immediate impact of a disaster, especially once you consider that manufacturing and trades are male-dominated, and that means the majority of the people in those workplaces would have disappeared in contrast to residential, which would be more of a 50-50 mix, with once again, more people who may not be able to evacuate by themselves in an emergency. If women can get sustainable cloning, gene work necessary to sustainably create new babies quickly, civilization probably wouldn't end, but it would still massively decrease. Depending on the premise, you wouldn't even need cloning. Just access to sperm banks. Or even without that, there would be baby boys around 9 months after the snap. Since some people would have had sex in the 1 to 2 days before the disappearance. The sperm can survive in the female reproductive system for up to 5 days. So on a global scale there would be baby boys born in 9 months. But after that no new babies before those boys are able to produce sperm. Which would result in an interesting bottleneck. Women don't need to clone anyone, sperm banks are everywhere. We'd have men back in less than 9 months. Views on homosexuality would ease up real fast, I bet. Ye old, there ain't nothing gay about getting your dick sucked. You're the ones that are gay for sucking my dick, Big Bob.